Think cleaning was tough before modern tech. The Romans had no soap, vacuums, or even toilet paper, yet they stayed surprisingly clean. Do you think you could handle living in a world where your laundry routine involved buckets of human waste? Well, if you can't, brace yourself. Their cleaning habits only get wilder. Their methods, as strange as they may seem today, were actually way more eco-friendly than ours. While we're busy polluting oceans with microplastics and toxic chemicals, the Romans were using all-natural, biodegradable solutions that in some ways might have been better than what we rely on now. These days, taking a shower means grabbing a bottle of body wash, squeezing out some chemical-filled gel, and rinsing it all down the drain. But Romans, they had a completely different approach. Instead of using soap, they covered themselves in olive oil. Yes, the same kind we use for cooking. The oil would mix with the dirt and sweat on their skin, and then they would scrape everything off using a strigil, a curved metal tool. It might sound odd, but it was actually an early form of exfoliation, leaving their skin smooth and clean. Now, compare that to today's endless rows of plastic soap bottles, many of which contain harsh chemicals and microplastics that wash into the ocean. The Roman method was not only zero waste, but it also avoided artificial additives that can harm both skin and the environment. Plus, olive oil was locally sourced and had natural antibacterial properties. So, who had the better bathing routine? Us or them? But hygiene didn't stop at bathing. When it came to laundry, the Romans took things to a whole new level, using urine. I'm not lying here, actual human pee. As disgusting as it sounds, urine contains ammonia, which acts as a powerful natural cleaner, breaking down stains and disinfecting fabrics. Public laundry facilities, known as phyllonocae, relied on a steady supply of urine, which was collected in large pots placed in busy areas. In fact, urine was so valuable for its cleaning properties that people were taxed for contributing it, a law introduced by Emperor Vespasian to boost revenue. Once collected, workers at the phyllonocae would soak dirty clothes in the liquid, then stomp on them barefoot, ensuring the ammonia broke down stains and disinfected the fabric. It was a harsh, smelly, but essential part of Roman laundry life. Today, we dump gallons of chemical-laden detergents into our washing machines, sending toxic residues into rivers and oceans, harming aquatic life. The Romans, however, had a zero-waste, all-natural solution, though it might make you gag. Their method didn't pollute the planet, but it came at a cost most of us wouldn't dare pay. So, while our clothes may smell fresher, they come with a hidden price tag: environmental destruction. Now, the real question is, could you handle doing laundry the Roman way? And forget about multi-surface cleaners and lemon-scented disinfectant sprays. Romans had to rely on simple, natural ingredients to keep their homes clean. Vinegar was their go-to disinfectant, killing bacteria without any synthetic chemicals. They also used wood ash mixed with water to create an early form of soap. This ash-based cleaner was surprisingly effective, cutting through grease and grime, just like modern detergents. Now think about our cleaning habits today. Every time we spray a countertop, we're releasing synthetic chemicals into the air, and every time we rinse down a drain, we're sending pollutants into waterways. The Romans, by contrast, relied on simple, non-toxic, biodegradable solutions that were just as effective. Maybe they were onto something, but when it came to personal hygiene, their methods were a bit more unsettling. But before we dive into that, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Okay, now brace yourself, because Romans didn't have toilet paper. Instead, they used a sponge on a stick called a tersorium, which was shared among public latrine users. After use, the sponge was rinsed in vinegar or salt water to clean it before being left for the next person. While this sounds unbelievably unsanitary by modern standards, it was at least a reusable and waste-free method. Now compare that to today's situation. We cut down millions of trees every year just to make toilet paper, most of which is flushed away after a few seconds of use. On top of that, the production process consumes massive amounts of water and energy. Sure, we wouldn't want to go back to sharing a sponge with strangers, but the Romans' approach was undeniably more sustainable than the waste-heavy system we have now. And it's not just toilet paper. Water is one of the most wasted resources in the modern world. Yet with just a turn of a faucet, we have an endless supply at our fingertips. We rarely stop to think about how much we use or how much we waste. But in ancient Rome, water was a precious resource, carefully sourced, managed, and distributed. Conservation wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. Fortunately, the Romans were excellent engineers and masters of water management, ensuring that every drop served a purpose. Unlike today, where billions of gallons are lost due to leaks, overuse, and pollution, the Romans designed their systems with conservation in mind. Their advanced engineering, water recycling methods, and strict regulations kept their cities running without the waste we see today. Many aqueducts still stand today, a testament to their durability. Take public bathhouses. They weren't just for hygiene. They were social hubs where thousands shared the same circulating water, minimizing waste. Instead of draining used water immediately, they filtered and repurposed it for cleaning streets, irrigating crops, or flushing public toilets. Every drop had value. Meanwhile, modern systems flush clean, treated drinking water straight down the drain with barely a second thought. And rainwater? It wasn't wasted either. The Romans collected and stored it in underground cisterns, ensuring reserves for dry periods. Wealthy homes had their own collection systems, and cities maintained public reservoirs. In contrast, modern cities often treat rainwater as waste, letting it flow into drains instead of saving it for reuse. Water wasn't unlimited in Rome, and laws regulated its fair distribution. Large estates couldn't hoard it, and businesses had restrictions. Today, many regions struggle with droughts, while others waste millions of gallons daily with no oversight. The Romans didn't just move water, they controlled, recycled, and preserved it with precision. Despite having advanced technology, modern society wastes far more water than they ever did. Their conservation strategies weren't just ahead of their time. They're lessons we're only now realizing we need. And here's the real shocker. You won't believe just how advanced their system really was. Now, in today's world, we throw things away without a second thought. Broken furniture, worn-out clothes, and leftover building materials all end up in landfills, creating an endless cycle of waste. But the Romans, they had a completely different mindset. With no modern factories producing cheap replacements, they had to make the most of what they had. Instead of discarding materials, they found ways to repurpose, reuse, and reinvent them, making their society far more resourceful than ours. One of the most impressive examples of Roman repurposing can be seen in their architecture. When old buildings were damaged or abandoned, they weren't simply left to decay. Stones, bricks, and marble from ruined structures were carefully salvaged and reused in new construction. Even in the Roman Forum, where once grand temples and monuments stood, later generations took materials from older buildings to construct new ones. The Colosseum itself was partially stripped of its stone after the fall of the empire, and those materials were repurposed for churches, homes, and other structures. Unlike modern construction, where demolition waste is often discarded, the Romans saw value in every piece of material they had. What about Roman concrete? It's one of the greatest inventions of the ancient world, and another example of sustainable building. Unlike today's concrete, which deteriorates over time, Roman concrete actually became stronger with age due to its unique mixture of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater. But what made it even more remarkable was the way Romans recycled old concrete. When structures needed repairs or were torn down, broken concrete was ground up and mixed into new batches, reducing the need for fresh materials. This technique made their buildings not only durable, but also incredibly efficient in resource use. Metals were another highly repurposed material in Roman society. Bronze statues, when they fell out of favor or were no longer needed, were often melted down and transformed into coins, weapons, or household tools. Even lead from old plumbing systems was extracted and reused for new pipes, roofing materials, and even writing tablets. Doesn't it sound familiar, yet different to today? Where electronic waste piles up with no real plan for recycling, Romans ensured that valuable metals were never wasted. But wait, glass was also repurposed rather than discarded. Archaeological evidence shows that Romans practiced glass recycling, collecting broken pieces, melting them down, and reshaping them into new vessels, windows, and decorative items. This was particularly important because glass production required high energy and resources, making reuse a practical and economical choice. Today, glass is recyclable, yet large amounts still end up in landfills, something the Romans would have considered an unnecessary waste. Clothing and textiles were treated with the same mindset. Fabric was not easily replaced, so garments were repaired, patched, and altered to extend their lifespan. When clothing became too worn to wear, it was turned into rags for cleaning or repurposed into padding and insulation. Wool and linen, the primary materials used in Roman clothing, were valuable commodities, and people took great care to make the most out of every piece. Even today, fast fashion has created a culture of disposable clothing, while the Romans understood the importance of maximizing the use of every thread. Even organic waste wasn't ignored. Food scraps, animal bones, and plant material were used as fertilizer to enrich soil, ensuring that nothing went to waste. In urban areas, leftover food from markets and homes was often repurposed into animal feed. The concept of waste and consumerism as we know it today simply didn't exist in Roman society. They found a use for nearly everything. The Roman approach to repurposing wasn't just about necessity, it was an ingrained part of their culture. Materials were expensive and labor-intensive to produce, so they treated resources with respect. Unlike modern society, where disposable goods are the norm, the Romans instinctively understood the value of sustainability. Their ability to reuse materials efficiently played a major role in the success and longevity of their civilization. But trust me, we haven't even got to the most interesting part. Keeping homes and cities clean in ancient Rome was no easy task, especially without modern cleaning supplies, running water in every house, or garbage collection. But the Romans, known for their engineering and organization, figured out how to maintain cleanliness in ways that might even put some modern cities to shame. Inside the home, keeping things clean was both a necessity and a sign of good living. Wealthy Romans had slaves who did most of the housework, sweeping floors, scrubbing walls, and keeping furniture dust-free. But even in poorer homes, people took care to keep their living spaces tidy. Floors were swept daily with brooms made from twigs, and water mixed with ash, vinegar, or sand was used to scrub surfaces. Since most homes had mosaic or stone floors rather than carpets, spills and dirt were easier to clean, though dust still settled everywhere, especially in dry seasons. Homes often had open courtyards, which meant wind and street dust could quickly dirty indoor spaces, so regular sweeping was a must. But cleaning entire cities, that was a much bigger challenge. With thousands of people, crowded markets, and animals roaming the streets, waste could quickly pile up if left unchecked. To combat this, the Romans created one of the world's earliest sewer systems, the Cloaca Maxima, a massive drainage system that carried rainwater and waste out of the city and into the Tiber River. Though it wasn't a perfect solution, since untreated waste still ended up in the river, it was far more advanced than what most civilizations had at the time. Public latrines were another way the Romans managed city cleanliness. Instead of everyone disposing of waste individually, these communal toilets allowed multiple people to relieve themselves over a flowing water system that washed everything away. Wealthy homes had their own private toilets, but most people used these public restrooms, which, while efficient, weren't exactly the most pleasant places to be. Sponges on sticks, soaked in vinegar, were used instead of toilet paper, a method that worked but would definitely make modern hygiene enthusiasts cringe. And street cleaning, it a daily task. Workers swept roads and sidewalks to remove dust, trash, and animal waste. Most Roman cities had strict rules about waste disposal, and throwing garbage onto the streets was often forbidden. In some areas, fines were imposed on those who didn't dispose of waste properly. But despite these efforts, cities could still be dirty, especially in poorer neighborhoods, where sanitation was harder to maintain. Public bathhouses also played a major role in keeping cities cleaner. These massive bathing facilities, open to everyone for a small fee, ensured that people could wash regularly. Unlike today, where people shower in private homes, Romans relied on these communal spaces to stay clean. The bathwater was reused multiple times, with dirt and oils floating to the surface and being skimmed off. While this wasn't the most sanitary system by modern standards, it was far better than having a population that rarely bathed at all. But the most brutal part, it was cleaning up after wars. And trust me, cleaning up after a battle in ancient Rome was the filthiest and overwhelming task. The Romans had to deal with the pure mess of blood-soaked battlefields, scattered bodies, broken weapons, and ruined landscapes, all by hand. The aftermath of a fight didn't just end when the last sword was swung. It was followed by days, sometimes weeks, of grueling labor to restore order. The first priority after a battle was clearing the bodies. With thousands of bodies lying in open fields, the stench of death would spread fast, attracting scavengers and disease. Romans knew the dangers of leaving corpses to rot, so soldiers, slaves, and locals were tasked with removing the fallen. If the battlefield was near a Roman settlement, mass graves were dug quickly, and bodies were buried as fast as possible to prevent contamination. For Roman soldiers, however, burial was a sacred duty. If time allowed, their fallen comrades were given proper funerals with rites to honor them. In some cases, bodies were cremated to prevent the spread of disease, with the ashes collected and sent back to families if possible. Enemy soldiers, on the other hand, were often left in mass pits or burned without ceremony. Weapons, armor, and anything of value were stripped from the dead. Romans never wasted good metal. Swords, shields, and helmets were gathered, repaired, and redistributed to new soldiers or melted down and reforged. Even battlefield debris, like broken chariots and splintered spears, was collected, as wood and iron were far too valuable to leave behind. Enemy weapons were either repurposed or displayed as trophies, a reminder of Rome's victory. Then came the task of dealing with the wounded. Roman medics, known as medici, rushed in after battles to treat survivors, prioritizing those who could still fight. The injured were often taken to makeshift field hospitals, or, in larger campaigns, sent back to military bases with permanent medical facilities. Battlefield wounds were horrible. Deep cuts, shattered bones, and infections from dirty weapons meant many didn't survive long. Without antibiotics, infection was a death sentence, so medics relied on herbal remedies, cauterization, and amputation to save as many as they could. The battlefield itself, soaked in blood and littered with severed limbs, was a horrific sight that needed immediate attention. Pools of blood dried under the sun, and if rain came, the ground turned into a muddy, disease-ridden mess. Cities and towns near battle sites had their own nightmares to deal with. If a battle took place near a settlement, homes and streets could be filled with the wounded, bloodied bodies and destroyed property. Roman engineers were often sent to help rebuild, clearing rubble, reinforcing walls, and ensuring roads remained functional for military movement. The smell of death and decay hung in the air long after the fighting was over, and if the battle was large enough, it could take months to fully recover. Rome also had a long tradition of parading captured enemies and looted goods through the streets after a major victory. This meant that before a city could fully clean up, prisoners of war and stolen treasures were marched through town as a show of dominance. Afterward, many captured enemies were either executed or sold into slavery, while their weapons and armor were melted down to fuel Rome's never-ending war machine. One of the most chilling aspects of post-battle cleanup was the public display of enemy bodies. If a battle was particularly important, the Romans would leave enemy corpses hanging on crosses, impaled on spikes, or piled outside city gates as a warning. Heads of enemy leaders were sometimes sent back to Rome, mounted on pikes or placed in the forum for the public to see. While horrifying, this was Rome's way of ensuring that its enemies feared them long after the battle had ended. Despite the bloodshed and destruction, the Romans were highly efficient in restoring order. Their military discipline didn't end when the fighting stopped. Every piece of debris, every fallen soldier, and every broken structure was dealt with in a calculated manner. The battlefield was never just abandoned. It was picked clean, sanitized as much as possible, and left as a silent reminder of Rome's power. So, what do you think? Could you handle living with the Romans' brutal but resourceful cleaning methods? Or are you sticking with your vacuum and detergent? Let me know your thoughts in the comment below.